Thank you at home for watching us for the next hour. We do have a jam-packed hour coming up. First, we've got Michael Isikoff here with some incredible, fresh reporting about what apparently was a very tense day at the White House in advance of the president's Guantanamo speech tomorrow. Newt Gingrich has very embarrassingly picked the wrong issue on which to base his political comeback. Governor Bill Richardson will be here this hour to discuss what can be done about 2 Americans set to stand trial in North Korea. And our friend Anna Marie Cox officially rocks. That's all coming up this hour. But we begin tonight with exclusive news from an off-the-record, at times tense, White House meeting today on torture, military tribunals, and potential prosecutions of Bush administration officials. A meeting held at the White House on the eve of President Obama's big speech tomorrow on Guantanamo. President Obama announced his decision to shut down the prison at Guantanamo on his second day in office. The decision seen at the time as expected and relatively uncontroversial. Even his general election opponent, John McCain, had said that he would close Guantanamo if he were elected as well. But since his first week in office, the president's decisions on constitutional issues have been an escalating series of disappointments for civil libertarians. The president would maintain a system of essentially lawless detention, keeping the prison at Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan as a legal no man's land, a place outside judicial recourse, even as the government moved to close another extrajudicial facility at Guantanamo. The president would not support calls for an independent commission to investigate violations of the laws against torture during the last presidency. The president would not support the release of additional photos of prisoner abuse, a 180-degree reversal for this new administration, which had previously supported the decision to make the images available. And most recently, another 180-degree reversal from the president, a decision to maintain the Bush administration's cobbled-together system of military tribunals at Guantanamo, a system that candidate Obama had derided as incapable of administering anything worthy of the term justice. Well, tomorrow the president is due to speak about Guantanamo at 10 a.m. Eastern in Washington, D.C. According to the White House, the president will explain the decisions he's already made on Guantanamo and will offer a new framework for moving forward. Tonight, on the eve of that speech, we have information exclusive to this show to report about an off-the-record meeting that happened today between President Obama and leading human rights and civil liberties groups at the White House. Although the meeting was off the record, we can report that the president was told by a member of one of those groups that he is allowing President Bush's policies to become his own. We can report that the president was demonstrably not pleased with that characterization, but that he gave no ground on the issues of military commissions, potential prosecutions of former Bush administration officials for torture, or investigations of Bush-era torture policy. Amid very late breaking news tonight that a prisoner from Guantanamo may, for the first time, be coming to the United States for trial in a civilian court, even as the military tribunals at Guantanamo are kept going by this administration, Obama's relationship with the left and with the constitutionalists who thought of him as one of their own have never been more strained. Joining us now is Michael Isikoff, Newsweek investigative reporter and MSNBC contributor, and the source of this reporting. Mike, thanks very much for joining us.
Great to be with you, Rachel.
I have to ask you, just as a premise, if this was an off-the-record meeting, how do you know about it?
It's called reporting. Look, there were a lot of people there. It was a pretty extraordinary meeting. Leaders of a lot of the human rights groups, civil liberties groups. And what I found even more remarkable was who was there from the White House. Took place in the cabinet room, convened by President Obama. White House Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel, David Axelrod, Attorney General Eric Holder, White House Counsel Greg Craig were all there sitting in on this meeting. I think a sign of just how seriously they take the rebellion, if that is not too strong a word, they're getting from the left. At the same time, they're being pummeled from the right on this issue, as reflected in that Senate vote. In fact, the Senate was voting today, 90-6, to deny any funding for shutting down Guantanamo or transferring any detainees to the United States at the very moment that these liberal human rights and civil liberties groups were complaining that the president is moving too far to the right in this White House meeting.
Do we know that this is a meeting that the White House called rather than the groups asked for? Do we know what the purpose of the meeting was?
Yeah, I think that after last week's announcement about military commissions, when a lot of these groups and their leaders were critical of what the president was doing, the White House felt the need to reach out to them, to bring them in, try to bring them into the fold, and hear what they had to say. The leaders of these groups repeated many of their criticisms. They expressed concerns that some of the premises that Obama was using on military commissions, on the prospect that we might get indefinite detention of some of the Gitmo detainees, holding them indefinitely without trial, in moving in this direction, he was accepting some of the same premises as the Bush administration. They laid that out. Obama didn't like that. He started out the meeting by complaining at one point about the mess he'd been left by his predecessor. And when some of these interest groups raised, some of these human rights groups raised this, he was quite clear he didn't like it. He said it's not helpful to equate me with President Bush.
Well, let's take a specific example, one of these specific issues, the subject of torture prosecutions, the possibility of maybe a truth commission or a commission of inquiry of some kind onto the issue of torture. Your sources are telling you that the president remained firmly against pursuing any of those things at this meeting today. But is there any sense of what his arguments are to defend that stance, or is it still just this generic assertion that we need to move forward and not look back?
Well, actually, it was interesting. When the Truth Commission came up towards the end of the meeting, the president had a somewhat different explanation for his resistance to that. He talked about all the congressional investigations that were going on, the litigation that was going on, and he said it was too distracting to his staff, that too much time was being taken up. He actually looked directly at Attorney General Holder, who was present at the meeting, and indicating that Holder was having to spend too much time on this issue. Now, some of those present have made the point that that's the reason to have a 9/11 style commission. Instead of having many congressional investigations, have one presidentially backed commission with subpoena power that can do all this. And the president didn't necessarily reject that, but he raised this issue of a distraction, too much time. Then after that, one of those present raised the idea of a criminal prosecution, even one criminal prosecution, as a symbol, sort of, a trophy, I think the word was used, to show that such conduct would not, for torture, to show that such conduct would not be tolerated again. And the president sort of curtly dismissed the idea, made it clear he had no interest in that. What was interesting about that is his attorney general, again, Eric Holder, sat there silently, didn't say a word. The president could have said.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. The president could have said that's Eric Holder's decision to make, but he didn't. He seemed to cut it off.
I'm sorry to have interrupted you, Mike. That's exactly what I was going to interject to say. That seems like the biggest news here. If the president has publicly said, listen, this is up to the attorney general to decide whether or not it's appropriate to pursue criminal investigations and prosecutions. This is not a political matter. This is a law enforcement matter, and the Justice Department does not work for the president. It works to enforce the laws of the United States. And then he's meeting with people who are advocating investigations and prosecutions and answering on behalf of his attorney general. That's news, because that would imply that what he's saying publicly and what he's saying in private meetings behind the scenes are not at all the same thing.
Well, this is, I think, an important issue. We've discussed this before on this show, that the whole idea of criminal prosecutions really ought to be left up to the Justice Department based on the facts and the law, the evidence. The one thing you don't want to have happen is political considerations. Now, in this case, it may just be political considerations of, we want to get health care through the Congress. We want to get climate change through the Congress. It's not helpful to have, in our efforts to get Republican support for that, to have criminal investigations underway that's just going to alienate the Republicans. And I think the comeback to that is that's not a proper consideration when you're trying to decide whether somebody broke the law or not. Those political factors should not have any influence whatsoever.
There's a reason why the top law enforcement official of the United States is not the president of the United States, but rather the attorney general. Incredible news, incredible reporting. Michael Isikoff, MSNBC contributor, investigative correspondent for Newsweek. This is invaluable stuff. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Rachel.
Okay, coming up, the very important role that very scary music is playing in the congressional debate about the prison at Guantanamo. And former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich is demanding the resignation of the current Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, for accusing the CIA of lying. If this were boxing, this would be called leading with your face. Stay with us. But first, one more thing about keeping the base happy. Today was the day that the Republican National Committee was due to vote on a resolution to demand that the other party rename itself. Instead of the Democratic Party, Republican activists wanted to insist that the Democratic Party rename itself the Democrat Socialist Party. Well, now we will never know if the Democratic Party would have acquiesced to that demand and actually changed their name if this resolution had passed, because the resolution was watered down before it passed. Republican National Committee members only able to bring themselves today to urge the Democratic Party to stop with its socialist agenda, even if they don't actually want to go as far as calling them socialists. Now that that's settled, my health care feels cheaper already, and the wars are over, and the war criminals have been prosecuted, and we caught bin Laden.
Me again.
Okay, now this is the last time, all right?
Thanks. We don't deliver anything like this as crispy flatbread.
Introducing the taste that's never been delivered. DiGiorno Crispy Flatbread Pizza. It's not delivery, it's DiGiorno.
National Car Rental knows I'm picky. So at National, I go right past the counter.
And you get to choose any car in the aisle.
Choose any car. You cannot be serious.
Seriously, you choose.
Okay.
Go National. Go like a pro.
Yes. Yes. Yes, yes, and yes.
So you really do have America's largest push-to-talk coverage area?
Yes.
Okay, we're gonna need a lot more darts. And a new map.
Switch to Verizon Wireless, owner of the nation's largest push-to-talk network coverage area and the most reliable voice network in America. Activate push-to-talk and get this great deal.
The newest staffer in Congress works for the House Energy Committee, has the lowly title of staff assistant, and would not give his name to the Wall Street Journal when a reporter asked for it last night. The one thing we know about this new staff assistant in Congress is that he works for the Democrats, and he's a speed reader. Professionally, he is a professional speed reader. He can read an entire page of text out loud in 34 seconds. The reason he's been hired is because the Republican plan to block the Democrats' global warming bill is allegedly to force all 946 pages of that bill to be read aloud, followed by the text of all of the several hundred amendments the Republicans plan to offer to this bill, even though they know that basically all of those amendments will fail. The plan is to make the process of passing the bill take so long that it fails through sheer exhaustion. Hence, the Democrats hiring a speed reader. You know, sometimes Congress is just one big game of, oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Huh, huh.
It's a curious thing that happens. It seems when we get to a place where no one knows us, we become most ourselves, trying new things, making new friends, laughing out loud, and dancing in the streets. It's time to venture out. Who knows just who we might discover as we come alive under the spell of pure Michigan. Your trip begins at michigan.org.
My mom is pretty proud of me. She thinks I can do anything, and she's a character. It became very obvious to me that my mother needed me. I could just tell by her voice that she was declining. I had to give up my job and went to her, and because I wasn't working, got behind in my payments. I got some pretty good advice. Basically, it was communicate with your card company.
If you're struggling to make payments, your credit card companies are here to help.
I really felt that I had a human being on the other end of the phone.
We've come together to let consumers know how we can help.
My name is John. This is my wife, Carrie. Our family have been members of the Tucson Federal Credit Union for over 30 years.
When it came time for us to get our mortgage for our new home, my husband had shopped around with many different banks, and Tucson Federal Credit Union came out on top. They had the money to lend us in a time when banks had stopped lending. They returned phone calls quickly. They offered the best rates. The people at TFCU are great. We are invested in them because they are invested in us.
It's better than a bank.
Now, Hardball tomorrow. Chris Matthews scores the President Obama Dick Cheney war of words over national security.
It's a hell of a fight.
Who hit hardest on the Gitmo debate?
Could be trouble here.
Hardball with Chris Matthews tomorrow at 7 Eastern on MSNBC. The place for politics.
In the imaginary dictionary of modern American political science, in the H section, sort of right near the end of the H section, there's a very hard to pronounce word there that is spelled Hypocrite. And next to that entry for that word is a picture, like one of those pencil sketchy Wall Street Journal pictures of former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich. In 1998, the then twice-married Newt Gingrich was the head pitchfork and torchbearer for the Let's Impeach Bill Clinton campaign.
What you have lived through for 2.5 long years is the most systematic, deliberate obstruction of justice, cover-up, an effort to avoid the truth we have ever seen in American history. The American people have the right to know the truth.
At the same time that Newt Gingrich was grandstanding against the philandering President Clinton, Speaker Gingrich himself was cheating on his wife with a House staffer more than 20 years younger than he was. Wouldn't be relevant if it wasn't so politically relevant. It wasn't the end of his career as Speaker, but it was close. The end actually came after an ethics reprimand for which he ultimately had to pay a $300,000 fine. But now Newt Gingrich is trying to launch a comeback, floating the idea of maybe running for president, and he has found a cause to run on. He's given an interview to ABC Radio. He's written a column for Human Events Online. He's made numerous television appearances in the past week, all in the service of his demand that the current Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, should resign. Gingrich says Pelosi showed, quote, contempt for the men and women who protect our nation. He says she made America less safe, with every word in that sentence capitalized. He says she has made she has even made more vulnerable to nuclear attack, made us more vulnerable to nuclear attack in this country because of her claim that the CIA misled Congress about its briefings on torture. Mr. Gingrich is demanding that Nancy Pelosi resign for this horrendous slight to our nation's intelligence professionals. It may be instructive to note here that Mr. Gingrich is not demanding that the top Republican on the House Intelligence Committee resign for having said exactly the same thing about the CIA. Last year, Republican Congressman Pete Hoekstra alleged that the CIA may have been lying in testimony to Congress about the shooting down of a plane in Peru, saying, quote, we cannot have an intelligence community that covers up what it does and then lies to Congress. Mr. Gingrich was confronted about this double standard today when he appeared on Good Morning America. He refused to acknowledge the hypocrisy.
So should he be repudiated for those words too?
Well, in that case, he's writing a specific letter asking them to change something that they were doing.
So
he did not say in that letter the CIA routinely lies to the Congress.
Well, he says lies. He says what it does and then lies to Congress.
And I think that they actually had to come back and testify.
Yes, but the difference, you see, is that he's not a Democrat. Don't you see the ethical difference here? Mr. Gingrich himself wrote an op-ed in 2007 accusing the intelligence community of producing a national intelligence estimate that was, quote, so professionally unworthy, so intellectually indefensible, and so fundamentally misleading that it is damaging to our national security. You think that qualifies as accusing the intelligence community of being misleading? And if confronted with this horrible truth about his own statements about our nation's intelligence professionals, will Newt Gingrich now demand the resignation of himself? Joining us now is Chris Hayes, Washington editor of The Nation. Chris, thank you for coming on the show tonight.
Thank you, Rachel.
Am I being hopelessly naive in calling hypocrisy here? Does Washington just not care about the pot calling the kettle black?
You know, I hate to sound overly cynical, but the short answer is no. Washington does not care. I mean, you know, hypocrisy is just, it doesn't function here in any sense. I mean, part of it, there's a few things. One is that power relations switch up a lot, partisan relationships switch up, and so there's a necessary baseline to which people make arguments in reverse all the time based on where they are in the political setting, and that's done on both sides of the aisle. Second of all, I think the important thing to understand is that Newt Gingrich is not making intellectually serious arguments, okay? His arguments, it's not the content of them that matters. It's a speech act, okay? He is, the words are coming out, but the words and arguments don't matter. What matters is that he's saying them, that he's accusing the speaker, that he's getting headlines. So I think in some ways the press, you know, both inflates Gingrich's sort of role in the Republican Party in American politics, but also there's an understanding that, like, this guy is not making any kind of intellectually serious arguments at all, ever.
I love the idea that it's a speech act. So it's like cheese food isn't actually cheese. Exactly. But in terms of where Gingrich is going, though, I mean, it's been a little bit weird because Gingrich is supposed to be the ideas guy, but as you say, he's often not making very much sense. He's just joined Eric Cantor's group, which is supposed to be all about the Republican future, and they made a really big deal about that. Mr. Gingrich, of course, is from the 90s. Is he going anywhere? Does he have a job?
You know, this is amazing to me. I see him in green rooms all over town, and I never quite understand what he does for a living, to be totally honest, aside from appear on television, and suddenly he is everywhere. I mean, obviously he has a book to sell, so that's part of it. But you know, he has always been a master at getting the press to cover him. When he was a freshman backbencher and he stood up and he accused the Democratic House Speaker of ethical violations, and he generated a stir of controversy when he sort of prosecuted a series of quote-unquote scandals against the House Democratic leadership when he was in the minority. He has always understood how to get headlines, and that's all he's doing here. You know, you have to see it in the general pattern of Gingrichism, which is essentially attracting attention to himself. The other thing I'll say quickly is that this notion he's running for president, I think, is crazy. He's not going to run for president. He's always saying he's going to run for president, so people at least take him somewhat seriously. But, you know, there is just no chance that Newt Gingrich is going to be the next president of the United States or even run for president.
Well, Chris, let me ask you something on the Pelosi side of this, and it's not on the Gingrich side of this. Pete Hoekstra is also sort of on the how dare she bandwagon with Pelosi, even though he himself accused the CIA of lying. Right. And we got Congressman Pete King today calling Pelosi's comments about the CIA a terrible slander against the leading intelligence service in the U.S., when I think it was only like 2 years ago that Peter King himself made the accusation that CIA employees were having orgies at the Watergate Hotel. So Gingrich may have his own set of political mores here, but what about these other ambitious guys like King and Hoekstra?
Again, look, they think they can press an advantage on national security. That's the sort of baseline fundamental political reality here. And they have nothing else. I mean, when they talk about anything else, anything, I mean, they just have no solutions for the country's problems at the moment. And they don't want to talk about healthcare. They don't want to talk about, you know, sort of re-engineering an economy. They don't want to talk about coming out of the recession. This is sort of some of that old-time religion. They've gone to this well before. They think it's going to help again. I think that Democrats are overly spooked by this kind of talk, and I think the press in Washington is still habituated to believing that it's going to be incredibly powerful. But I'm really skeptical that the American public at all is going to bite this time. I think that everybody's kind of running these old routines, and there's very little evidence that it still has the kind of control over the minds of the populace that it did, say, 4 or 5 years ago.
Well, Chris, as somebody who only has a job being on television, I thank you for being on television with me and for having another job as Washington editor of The Nation. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Rachel.
For more than 2 months, 2 American journalists have been held prisoner in North Korea. We have been covering it on and off in the 2 months that they have been in custody. But coming up, we're going to be talking with Governor Bill Richardson about what might be able to be done to try to secure their release. And our friend Anna Marie Cox takes the Don't Ask, Don't Tell question right to the White House. To be more specific, she takes it and she brings it. That's next.
Fair, straightforward pricing. That's what TD Ameritrade stands for. Think about it. Why pay investing fees you shouldn't have to, or account fees that aren't clear, like inactivity fees or maintenance fees? It's not right, and you know it. And the thing is, the other investment firms know it, but they do it anyway, and that's just not fair or straightforward. TD Ameritrade. Independence is the spirit that drives America's most successful investors.
You're gonna love it here.
It's a great block.
Heads up.
They may not love everyone on the guest list,
Dale. Woo!
but everyone loves the great taste of Country Time, America's favorite lemonade.
More lemonade?
Sure.
For me? Your favorite toy? I couldn't. You're gonna want Mr. Fuzzy Man even more now that we've discovered Beneful Playful Life. With real wholesome ingredients like beef, egg, and even oatmeal. Extra protein for strong muscles. So you're ready for anything. You think you're getting spoiled, but it's so good for you too.
Beneful Playful Life. Another healthful, flavorful Beneful.
Why are you in my yard?
Why are you in your yard? There's all sorts of super destinations. You could go to a jazz festival, stock car racing, ride a donkey in a canyon. You just gotta go. I got free Wi-Fi.
On June 5th,
I'm Dr. Marshall.
friends travel through time and space.
No immediate danger. I repeat, no immediate danger.
Will you stop that? Please, you're freaking me out.
To the land of the lost.
You can't cross the bumbling idiot of the dinosaur world.
You ever get tired of being wrong? I really do.
Rated PG-13. Tomorrow.
The president unveils his plan to bring Gitmo detainees to the U.S. Will Congress play ball? The Ed Show.
Hi, my name is Michael. I'm the owner of MTM Enterprise, a trucking company here in Arizona. I went to my bank that I've been dealing with for over 14 years. I wanted to get a business loan to start our new business. They didn't seem like they had any interest in helping me. After my bank turned me down, I went to Tucson Federal Credit Union where I had a loan for a vehicle. The bank that I was dealing with for 14 years told me no. Tucson Federal Credit Union, they told me yes. That just blew me away. Speaking from experience, Tucson Federal Credit Union is better than a bank.
Want to burn 1,000 calories in a 1 hour long workout? You will when you train like a boxer. Boxing Incorporated trainers push you like your own personal coach. A strength workout, a cardio workout, all in one. And we're not just boxing. Boxing Incorporated has mixed martial arts, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, and grappling. The best personal training available. Boxing Incorporated, 2 locations in Tucson. Sign up this month and get hand wraps, gloves, and your first month free.
FreeTripleScore.com.
Still ahead, Governor Bill Richardson, a veteran of negotiations with North Korea, will be here to talk about the 2 American journalists still in prison and about to stand trial in the international enigma that is the North Korean court system. Later, the Democratic caucus in Congress is apparently really afraid of a song. I'm not kidding, and it's turned out to be sort of a serious problem. And the Cannes Film Festival is fabulous. It's on, and we have dispatched Kent Jones to report on it. Sort of. That's all coming up. But first, it's time for a couple of holy mackerel stories in today's news. We start with a White House follow-up on our recent coverage of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. As you know, 2 members of the armed forces have on this show come out publicly about being fired from the military for being gay. First Lieutenant Dan Choi is a West Point grad, an infantryman, and Iraq combat veteran who's fluent in Arabic. The Army has notified him he's being dismissed from the National Guard. Lieutenant Colonel Victor Fehrenbach is an F-15 fighter pilot, an 18-year veteran of the Air Force who has served in both Iraq and Afghanistan. He's been decorated for heroism in combat. The Air Force has notified him that his career is being ended as well. Both men are fighting to stay in the military, but as long as the Obama administration continues to implement the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy that the president says he's against, the careers of both of these officers are effectively over. The military will have lost them forever. The investment in their training will be a loss. Both will become civilians, despite their skills and their desire to redeploy. Today at the White House press briefing, Air America's Anna Marie Cox, a friend of this show who's on deck to join us tomorrow, asked the White House spokesman about Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
This isn't about Gitmo, but it is about national security. Recently, 3 officers, West Point graduate Lieutenant Dan Choi, Air Force pilot Lieutenant Colonel Victor Fehrenbach, and Army Second Lieutenant Stanley Tsao, were all dismissed under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And is their dismissal a part of his national security strategy, or is their dismissal itself a threat to national security?
No. As I've said, I think when I was asked about these individuals, I think it may have been last week, I said that the president agreed that and said during the campaign and agreed with former members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff that the policy wasn't working for our national interests, that he committed to change that policy, and that he's working with the Secretary of Defense and the Joint Chiefs on making that happen. And the only durable way to do that is to go through Congress, and that's what the president intends to do.
That part where Mr. Gibbs says the president is working with the Secretary of Defense and the Joint Chiefs on making that happen to change the policy, the Pentagon spokesman said just yesterday that that's not actually happening, that there is no planning underway. There's no work underway inside the Pentagon toward changing the policy, despite the fact that the White House keeps saying that there is. Just as a programming note, good on Anna Marie for asking that very tough question. And from the terribly, 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 extremely wide world of sports, tonight we have some swimming news. New high-tech swimsuits hit the market early last year. The new swimsuits do 2 things. Number 1, they make swimmers look like mer people. And number 2, they make swimmers go very fast. In the last 18 months, over 100 world swimming records have been broken. At last year's World Championship, 9 swimmers set record times. 8 of the 9 were wearing the new suits. Between February and March of last year, 22 world records were set, 21 of them by swimmers wearing these fancy suits. So with so many new records broken and charges of tech doping being hurled, the International Swimming Federation investigated, and today they announced that 146 types of these fancy suits are henceforth banned from competition. The banned suits include the X-Glide, made by Arena, and the Italian Jake 01 model. The suits are said to violate the International Swimming Charter, which says, quote, swimsuit material shall not be constructed of or include elements/systems which create air/water trapping effects during use. Now, before you get all upset about Michael Phelps and get your trunks in a bunch, know this. The Speedo LZR laser suit that Phelps and his fellow Americans wore during last summer's Olympics, at which he won a record-breaking 8 gold medals, those suits are still approved for competition. Those suits don't create air-water trapping effects, so they're not illegal. They do give you other odd swim powers. That suit has no stitches. It's welded together. Its edges are taped. The fabric somehow does not absorb liquids, and awkwardly, it has a built-in girdle-like effect that I guess keeps your body in optimal swimming position. Speedo claims the suit reduces drag by 10%. The downside, of course, is that they cost $550 a piece, and for racing purposes, you have to buy a new one every 10 races. Also, deep down inside, no matter how fast you're going and no matter how stupendously fit you are as a world-class swimmer, some part of you can never truly, fully forget the fact that you are wearing a girdle.
So he's going away with Avis. Again. He'll probably get the Where To GPS so he can find all his precious flavored coffees and driving ranges on his business trip. Fine. That's the way he wants it. Fine. Forget about him. You don't need him. Did he just look back? I think he looked back.
Where To GPS can find anything from a driving range to a latte. Just one more reason Avis is your other car.
We're visiting hidden valleys across America to see how they like the taste of Kraft Ranch.
You want to try some Kraft Ranch?
Nice approach. Good form. Oh, he's got all of that one.
Mulligan.
Just want to see a nice shoulder turn and dip. A Kraft lover in Hidden Valley. Isn't that a 2-stroke penalty? No, it isn't. You can love it. There you have it. Seems to me people in Hidden Valley really love the taste of Kraft Ranch.
gave the C-Class high-strength steel reinforcements, improved aerodynamics, top and bottom, and 100 years of racing heritage only we can provide. You may not see all that went into making the C-Class, but you will feel it. Hurry in to the spring event by Mercedes-Benz for exceptional offers on the 2009 C-Class and other models going on right now at your authorized Mercedes-Benz dealer.
You know, I sell tools. Tools are uncomplicated. Nothing complicated about a pair of 10-inch hose clamp pliers. You know what's complicated? Shipping. Shipping's complicated.
Not really. With priority mail flat rate boxes from the Postal Service, shipping's easy. If it fits, it ships anywhere in the country for a low flat rate.
That's not complicated.
No.
Come on.
But a handshake?
Right here. All right.
Priority mail flat rate boxes, only from the Postal Service. A simpler way to ship.
It's a curious thing that happens. It seems when we get to a place where no one knows us, we become most ourselves. Trying new things, making new friends, laughing out loud, and dancing in the streets. It's time to venture out. Who knows just who we might discover as we come alive under the spell of pure Michigan. Your trip begins at michigan.org.
Keith has final say on the President and Dick Cheney's dueling national security speeches. Countdown with Keith Olbermann tomorrow at 8 on MSNBC.
What happens when the inmates run the cameras?
I want to get my life wet.
The season premiere of Lockup, Monday at 10 on MSNBC.
Current TV's Laura Ling has covered stories everywhere, from the front lines of Mexico's drug war to inside America's prisons to the slums of Haiti to most recently the Chinese-North Korean border. And that's where she and her colleague Yuna Lee were arrested by North Korean officials on March 17th. Ling and Lee have been sitting in a North Korean jail for the 64 days since then. And while they were allowed to talk with a Swedish diplomat on March 30th, North Korea has since cut off access to them. Ling and Lee stand accused of entering the country illegally and committing unspecified hostile acts, charges that could carry up to 10 years in a re-education labor camp. In a totalitarian country with an absolute dictator with no diplomatic ties with the United States, the only visible progress in their case over the past 2 months has been the announcement of a trial date, June 4th. And while Secretary of State Hillary Clinton says she is hopeful that the setting of a trial date is, quote, a signal that there can be a resolution as soon as possible, no American prisoner has actually ever been put on official trial in North Korea before. Instead, they've been released without legal proceedings, a couple of times with the crucial help of Governor Bill Richardson of New Mexico. In 1996, then Congressman Richardson went to North Korea. He was able to help secure the release of an American who had been detained for 3 months on spying charges. In 1994, he helped arrange the release of a U.S. soldier whose helicopter had strayed into North Korean territory. Might the United States once again have to call on the services of our next guest? We are joined now by New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson, a former Democratic presidential candidate. Governor Richardson, thanks very much for coming back on the show.
Nice to be with you, Rachel.
When you helped free 2 Americans that were detained in North Korea in the 90s, how were you able to do it? What was the process like?
Well, you have to understand the North Koreans. They're very unpredictable. They use the media very well to get their points across. Third, they're very prone to insults. And I recall in the previous administration, the axis of evil talk, insulting the North Korean leader, that really drove them to very bad extremes. What you have to do is what I believe the Obama administration is doing makes sense. Quiet diplomacy. Secretary Clinton has been talking to the Chinese, to third parties, to the Swedes, restrained in her comments. You have to keep the humanitarian side of the 2 journalists separate from the diplomatic differences that we have with the North Koreans. We want them to stop their nuclear weapons. They've broken down with the negotiations and the 6-party talks. So we have to emphasize the humanitarian side of getting these 2 young women out who are very good, dedicated journalists who are doing their job. But right now, there is a good sign. The good sign is that there is a trial date. In the previous cases, once you end the legal process of the North Koreans and they set a trial date, that's the time to move. The North Koreans have been relatively restrained in their criticism of the two women. Yes, illegally they came into their territory. They haven't used the word espionage that much. So I think there's some hopeful signs, but we will know after June 4th what happens next.
We've seen from North Korea recently, from this regime that is so often belligerent, so often seemingly irrational, at least from our perspective, when we look at their actions and we don't understand what's motivating them to take the actions that they do. Is it likely that they are going to want to combine this humanitarian crisis for these two women with diplomatic goals? Will they be trying to get some sort of concessions out of us diplomatically in order to get them back?
Well, what we need to avoid happening, Rachel, is exactly that. Keep the issue separate. Obviously, they see the two women as possible bargaining chips. Now, what the North Koreans want more than anything is they want to deal directly with us. Now, we've had the six-party talks. That's been the cornerstone of the past administration. We're continuing. The North Koreans, when it comes to nuclear weapons, when it comes to shutting down their plutonium activities, when it comes to just ending their sanctions, they want to deal with the United States. They don't want the other countries involved. But we've used the process of the six-party talks, and what a good sign of the Obama administration is that they've said, look, North Korea, we're ready to talk to you bilaterally, but also as part of the six-party talks that involve the other countries in Asia that have a lot of stakes in the issues of nuclear proliferation there. So they're testing us, the North Koreans. It's a new administration, and I believe so far the Obama people have handled it well. They've been restrained, quiet diplomacy, keeping the issues separate. So I think there's a little back and forth right now that maybe after June 4th we can get a breakthrough and get the two women out.
And even as our government is pursuing, as you say, quiet diplomacy, they have been publicly quite silent about it. They haven't made a lot of public statements about it. Current TV has been silent about the issue. Al Gore, of course, the proprietor of Current TV, has not spoken about it. The families involved have been very quiet on this story, which all affects the amount of political and media coverage that this story gets in the United States. Does that public strategy of staying very quiet about it, staying quite tight-lipped on this subject, does it make sense to you as a strategy, or do you think they ought to be speaking out more?
No, I believe it makes sense. I know the families. I've talked to them. Lisa Ling, the famous TV star, is involved, and she obviously could get a lot of attention, but she has been diplomatic, restrained. I've talked to Al Gore. He's been restrained. I think the administration has handled it well, strongly emphasizing the humanitarian effort to get them out, pushing the North Koreans to return to bilateral negotiations and the six-party talks. So I think all sides right now, including the North Koreans, now I'm going to get attacked for saying this, have been pretty restrained when it comes to the two girls that need to come out. I think as Americans we need to recognize that these are two human beings that were doing their job. They've been there 60 days. They deserve all kinds of diplomatic efforts. Other nations should get engaged to try to help them get released as soon as possible.
Well, your optimism about their situation is heartening because you know some things about these situations. New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson, thanks very much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Coming up on Countdown, Keith has a very special, shall I say, devastating WTF moment response to Rush Limbaugh's MSNBC challenge. And next on this show, it's back! More terrifying than ever before! And it's actually working this time on Democrats.
Zurich Help Point is here to help you feel confident about your business insurance in today's challenging times. Whether it's a rapid response to a crisis or direct access to more locally based risk engineers than anyone else, Zurich Help Point is backed by the strength and stability of Zurich to give you the solutions you need wherever you do business. It's here to help your world. Zurich Help Point, because change happens.
You're gonna love it here.
It's a great block.
Heads up.
They may not love everyone on the guest list,
Dale. Woo!
but everyone loves the great taste of Country Time,
Oh.
America's favorite lemonade.
More lemonade? Sure.
It's Neo to go. Ready, aim, protect. Neosporin gives you infection protection and pain relief. Neo to go plus pain relief. Every cut, every time, everywhere.
Performance now is all about logic. That some cars cost as much as $1,500 to maintain is one thing. That others cost even more is quite another. That a BMW costs you nothing to maintain defies all logic whatsoever, and in turn makes it the most logical choice of all. Performance now is the 3 Series. Visit your local BMW center today for a test drive.
There are bound to be a slew of furniture sales this weekend, but only one matters. The Lazy Boy Furniture Gallery's Memorial Day sale. Great savings throughout the store. And make no payments and pay no interest for a year. Just like those other furniture sales, the prices are cheap. Unlike those other sales, the furniture is not. Great savings throughout the store. And make no payments and pay no interest for a year. It's a better furniture sale because it's better furniture. So don't lollygag. Lazy Boy Furniture Galleries. It's time to get comfortable.
Once I built a railroad, now it's done. Brother, can you spare a dime?
As the Republican Party continues its search for meaning in the political minority, the man who led them there, former President George W. Bush, is adjusting to civilian life in Texas. The Dallas Morning News today linked to these photos of the new multi-million-dollar Bush family home in Dallas. 5 bedrooms, 6.5 bathrooms, and a lot of room to hang up men's shirts, apparently. Newsweek's Bill Minutaglio also reports this week that the former president is spending a lot of time post-White House with teenagers, inviting a local 14-year-old for an hour-and-a-half-long mano-a-mano conversation in Bush's backyard recently, and Bush placing repeated calls to a 19-year-old college freshman at Texas Christian University. Another strange call that 19-year-old took recently was from us. He'll be on this show tomorrow night to talk about talking to Bush. Make sure to tune in.
This is more than my easy button. It's my save so much on paper we can
do personal printing again button.
Sure, why not?
Now get 50% back in Staples Rewards when you purchase any case of paper. Staples, that was easy.
My doctor told me something I never knew. As we get older, our bodies become less able to absorb calcium. He recommended Citracal. It's a different kind of calcium. Calcium citrate with vitamin D for unsurpassed.
I figure the engineers who built the Ford F-150 are probably the same guys we all cheated off of in science class. We're thinking about pizza, they're thinking about aerodynamic wake properties. Crazy smart. Take fuel economy, for example. You can't get a truck with better mileage, and they didn't give up an ounce of power to get it. In fact, they actually increased the horsepower. Now that is some A-plus truck thinking. It's not just a pickup truck. It's a Ford F-150.
This is the Civic Value Package, and there's a good reason we call it that. The Civic has a lower true cost of ownership than its competition, and that can help save you money down the road on things like insurance and maintenance. Plus, it's remarkably fuel efficient. Add in the fact you can get it for $149 a month. The name Value Package just makes a lot of sense. Both kinds. Go to Edmunds.com for an independent report on the true cost to own a Civic. And then see your Honda dealer for great leases and low financing.
Right at the site.
Attention residents of the greater Washington, D.C. area. There is a pestilence spreading through the nation's capital caused by the music that makes everything scary. It doesn't matter what it is. Oh, Fortuna will make you feel afraid. The affliction that is spreading through Washington is O Fortuna-induced insanity, OFII. And right now, it is spreading through the Democratic caucus. During the presidential campaign, the idea of closing the prison at Guantanamo was a political winner. Everyone was on board. Obama was on board, McCain, congressional Democrats, congressional Republicans, even President Bush was on board. There was sort of general agreement that Guantanamo had become a lawless liability, a symbol of America not living by its own ideals. It needed to be shut down and pronto. When President Obama signed the order to close Guantanamo in January, again, massive support from both sides of the aisle. So today, when it came time to vote on whether President Obama would get the money to close Guantanamo, the measure, of course, passed unanimously. Sorry, I'm sorry, I've just been informed the appropriation was defeated by a vote of 90-6. 90-6? What changed between everyone's on board days and now?
So where are they going to go?
Military bases like MCAS Miramar or Camp Pendleton.
To the Navy base at Charleston, South Carolina.
From Guantanamo Bay to Alexandria, Virginia.
What changed is incredibly scary music was set to the problem. Republicans threw a completely over-the-top, parody-begging, ridiculous punch, claiming that somehow closing Guantanamo would mean releasing all of these dangerous terrorists into your neighborhood. They'll be delivering your mail. They'll be babysitting your kids. That punch had nothing behind it. It had no basis in reality. It had no claim to even rhetorical power. But it was apparently strong enough to knock out the Democratic Party. Today, a grand total of 6 Democrats voted to give the president funding to close Guantanamo. 6. What happened to the other 53? That's right. That music! O-F-I-I. O Fortuna-induced insanity. Democrats who once supported closing Guantanamo suddenly came down with a vague, non-specific fear that caused them to take totally incoherent political action. Take Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, for example. In January, Reid applauded President Obama's decision to close Guantanamo, saying, quote, revising the way we detain and interrogate terrorist suspects will help America more effectively fight terrorism and make Americans safer. Yeah, shut it down. That was Harry Reid then. Harry Reid now?
United States Senate, Democrats and Republicans do not want terrorists to be released in the United States. That's very clear.
No one's talking about releasing them. They're talking about putting them in prison somewhere in the United States.
Can't put them in prison unless you release them.
Can't put them in prison unless you release them. He has obviously been afflicted. He has O Fortuna-induced insanity, O-F-I-I. A spokesman for Senator Reid added further incoherence today when he tried to clarify Mr. Reid's stance by saying, quote, at this time he opposes transferring detainees to American prisons. At this time? But then maybe sometime in the future he'll drop the weird Republican talking point about putting people in prison being the same thing as putting people in your child's kindergarten class or just out on the street loose. At this time? What does that mean? Then there's Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein, who actually made a very sensible argument before the vote today.
We have maximum security prisons in California, eminently capable of holding these people as well, and from which people, trust me, do not escape. So I believe that this has really been an exercise in fear baiting. I hope it's not going to be successful.
Right. If there's one thing America can do, it's imprison people. That makes sense. It is just fear baiting. Okay, the clerk will now call the roll. All those in favor of stripping this funding, all those who disagree with that eminently reasonable argument from Senator Feinstein?
Senators voting in the affirmative. Mrs. Feinstein. Mrs. Feinstein. Aye.
Aye? Senator Feinstein, you just argued for the funding, for closing down Guantanamo. Now you're voting against it? I think she's been afflicted too. House Democrats have also come down with O-F-I-I, O Fortuna-induced insanity. They caved and stripped the funding from their version of the bill last week. Thankfully, though, there are still some the virus has not spread to.
The reality is we are holding some of the most dangerous terrorists in the world right now in our federal prisons. And you ought to have a little more respect for the men and women who are corrections officers who put their lives on the line every single day to keep us safe and to make sure that those who are dangerous are detained and incarcerated.
Senator Durbin and the 5 other Senate Democrats who voted to fund the closing of Guantanamo today, we have masks. The virus is coming. Do not let it spread to you.
guys actually walk the walk when it comes to communications technology?
Absolutely. I think you can save both a lot of money and a lot of people's time if you choose the right technology for the right place. And we think we save tens of millions of pounds a year.
Wow, that's a big number.
It's a very big number. So if you can do something that's good for the company and good for your shareholders at the same time, then it's pretty much a no-brainer.
This country definitely needs to focus on other ways to get energy.
We should be looking closer to home.
There are places off the continental shelf.
Natural gas can be a part of the solution.
I think we need to work on wind resources.
They ought to be carefully mapping every conceivable alternative.
There is an endless opportunity right here.
Yes. Yes. Yes, yes, and yes.
So you really do have America's largest push-to-talk coverage area?
Yes.
Okay, we're gonna need a lot more darts. And a new map.
Switch to Verizon Wireless, owner of the nation's largest push-to-talk network coverage area and the most reliable voice network in America. Activate push-to-talk and get this great deal.
Last year, more than 500,000 investors opened an account at TD Ameritrade. Maybe because TD Ameritrade's fair and straightforward pricing made sense to them. Maybe for the range of products, not just stocks, but bonds, mutual funds, CDs, and the clear objective guidance to help them choose. Or maybe because the people on the phone or in the branch just seemed like good people to work with. Knowledgeable and nice. So why not talk to TD Ameritrade? There's never been a better time for a second opinion.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at the sun. Me and everyone.
See what you love.
Look at
Love what you see. LensCrafters.
We're visiting hidden valleys across America to see how they like the taste of Kraft Ranch.
That's good stuff.
Uh-huh. See? People in Hidden Valley love Kraft Ranch.
This is Hidden Valley Golf Course.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I was shopping for a new car. Which one's me? A cool convertible or an SUV? Too bad I didn't know my credit was whack, cause now I'm driving off the lot in a used subcompact. F-R-E-E, that spells free. Creditreport.com, baby. Saw their ads on my TV. Thought about going but was too lazy. Now instead of looking fly and rolling fat, my legs are sticking to the vinyl and my posse's getting laughed at. F-R-E-E, that spells free. Creditreport.com, baby. Offer applies with enrollment and triple advantage.
Gitmo prisoners. Unwanted? Keith finds one American town with a welcome mat. Countdown with Keith Olbermann. Next, only on MSNBC.
With the possible exception of our Rachel Maddow Show editorial meetings, the Cannes Film Festival is the most glamorous and indulgent event in all of the glamorous, indulgent world of the business of show. And the Rachel Maddow Show's Glamour and Indulgence Bureau Chief Kent Jones is here to report. Hi, Kent.
Hello, Rachel.
Glamour and indulgence.
Glamour.
Do it.
Yeah, well, the Cannes Film Festival is where art and commerce meet, have a few drinks, hook up, have an awkward breakfast in the morning, and then never text each other again. Check it out.
It's been 15 years since Quentin Tarantino made a huge splash at Cannes with Pulp Fiction. Now QT is back with Inglourious Bastards, -2 for spelling, starring Brad Pitt as the commander of a band of Jewish Allied soldiers taking bloody revenge on the Nazis in this 2.5-hour, 4-language, revisionist World War II action comedy western splatter mashup.
And they need to be destroyed. Each and every man under my command owes me 100 Nazi scalps. And I want my scalps.
Apparently, so do the critics. Reaction to Bastards is a long way from the critical love fest Tarantino got for Pulp Fiction. Said The Guardian, today the full catastrophe of his new film arrived like some colossal armor-plated turkey from hell.
Nine!
The Hollywood Reporter said, the film lacks not only tension, but those juicy sequences where actors deliver lines loaded with subtext and characters drip menace with icy wit.
This is a tasty burger.
However, Variety sort of liked it, calling it a completely distinctive piece of American pop art.
Sound good?
Yes, sir!
Now, I haven't seen Inglourious Bastards yet, but there's one part I do like already.
Screwing it.
Bringing it back.
I have a tiny little mustache.
Very nice. Cocktail moment, Ken?
Yeah.
Today was the day they drank their reprocessed urine on the space station.
Oh.
Apparently tastes great.
Cheers.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks for watching tonight. We'll see you again tomorrow night. Countdown with Keith Olbermann starts right now.
Which of these stories will you be talking about tomorrow? Durbin, Harkin, Leahy, Levin, Reid, Whitehouse, the only senators to vote to supply the funds the president needs to close Gitmo. Democrats insist on a full dispersal plan before agreeing to close one of the greatest blights on this nation in its history. And Senator Inhofe echoes the Ensign Freudian slip that detainees have a better health care plan than the average American does. Any detainee over 55, he actually says, has an opportunity to have a colonoscopy. Voluntary? Of course, we couldn't move the detainees onto U.S. soil, even though the blind sheikh was incarcerated here, and the Unabomber, and Tim McVeigh. And there is a town in Montana with an empty high-tech prison that has...